Continuing Tiberius Gracchus. From Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough. By this he offended the Senate more than ever he had done before, and Pompeius stood up and acquainted them that he was the next neighbor to Tiberius, and so had the opportunity of knowing that Eudemus the Pergamenian had presented Tiberius with a royal diadem and a purple robe, as before long he was to be king of Rome. Quintus Metellus also upbraided him, saying that when his father was censor, the Romans, whenever he happened to be going home from a supper, used to put out all their lights, lest they should be seen to have indulged themselves in feasting and drinking at unreasonable hours, whereas now the most indigent and audacious of the people were found with their torches at night, following Tiberius home. Titus Annius, a man of no great repute for either justice or temperance, but famous for his skill in putting and answering questions, challenged Tiberius to the proof of the wager, declaring him to have deposed a magistrate who by law was sacred and inviolable. Loud clamor ensued, and Tiberius, quitting the Senate hastily, called together the people, and, summoning Annius to appear, was proceeding to accuse him, but Annius, being no great speaker, nor of any repute compared to him, sheltered himself in his own particular art, and desired that he might propose one or two questions to Tiberius before he entered upon the chief argument. This liberty being granted and silence proclaimed, Annius proposed his question. If you, said he, had a design to disgrace and defame me, and I should apply myself to one of your colleges for redress, and he should come forward to my assistance, would you for that reason fall into a passion and dispose him? Tiberius, they say, was much disconcerted at this question, that though at other times his assurance and his readiness of speech was always remarkable, yet now he was silent and made no reply. For the present he dismissed the assembly, but beginning to understand that the course he had taken with Octavius had created offense even among the populace as well as the nobility, because the dignity of the tribunes seemed to be violated, which had always continued till that day, sacred and honorable. He made a speech to the people in justification of himself, out of which it may not be improper to collect some particulars, to give an impression of his force and his persuasiveness in speaking. A tribune, he said, of the people is sacred indeed, and ought to be inviolable, because in a manner consecrated to be the guardian and protector of them. But if he degenerate so far as to oppress the people, abridge their powers, and take away their liberty of voting, he stands deprived by his own act of honors and immunities, by the neglect of the duty for which the honor was bestowed upon him. Otherwise we should be under the obligation to let a tribune do this pleasure, though he should proceed to destroy the Capitol or set fire to the arsenal. He who should make these attempts would be a bad tribune. He who assails the power of the people is no longer a tribune at all. Is it not inconceivable that a tribune should have power to imprison a consul, and the people have no authority to degrade him when he uses that honor which he received from them to their detriment? For the tribunes as well as the consuls hold office by the people's votes. The kingly government, which comprehends all sorts of authority in itself alone, is moreover elevated by the greatest and most religious solemnity imaginable into a condition of sanctity. By the citizens, notwithstanding this, deposed Tarquin when he acted wrongfully, and for the crime of one single man, the ancient government under which Rome was built was abolished forever. What was there in all Rome so sacred and venerable as the Vestal Virgins, to whose care alone the preservation of the eternal fire is committed? Yet if one of these transgress, she is buried alive. The sanctity for which what they consider to be gods and goddesses' sake is allowed them is forfeited when they offend against these same entities. So likewise a tribune retains not his inviolability, which for the people's sake was accorded to him, when he offends against the people and attacks the foundations of that authority from whence he derived his own. Well, just because somebody has violated the religious rules of their cult doesn't mean they should be excluded. Now, if they've caused problems, like nowadays with the FBI and stuff like this, for their masjid or their temple or their synagogue or temple or church or whatever, yeah, I totally understand kicking them out. But otherwise, it's like in America, can't you not discriminate when it comes to criminal history or disability? Or someone made a mistake, why kick them out forever? Make people move to a different town just to attend a religious service. That's So likewise a tribune retains not his inviolability, which for the people's sake was accorded to him, when he offends against the people and attacks the foundations of that authority from whence he derived his own. We esteem him to be legally chosen tribune, who was elected only by majority of votes. It is not therefore the same person, much more lawfully degraded, when by a general consent of them all they agreed to depose him. Nothing is so sacred as religious offerings, yet the people were never prohibited to make use of them, but suffered to remove and carry them wherever they pleased. So likewise, as it were some sacred present, they have lawful power to transfer the tribuneship from one man's hands to another's. Nor can that authority be thought inviolable and irremovable, which many of those who have held it have had of their own acts surrendered and desired to be discharged from. These were the principal heads of Tiberius's apology, but his friends, apprehending the dangers which seemed to threaten him and the conspiracy that was gathering head against him, were of opinion that the safest way would be for him to petition that he might be considered tribune for this year ensuing. And going back a little bit, I can mention there were some correction officers divided between parts of Oregon and Washington who said stuff they were caught saying stuff to the point where if somebody's locked up, even accused of something that violates the terms of their faith, why should they be allowed religious freedom in their... No, that's... if someone has made a mistake according to their religion, it shouldn't mean they should be denied religious freedom for the period of their incarceration. That's, but they didn't make that too much of a scandal when that story broke, but it kind of is, right? Upon this consideration, he again endeavored to secure the people's goodwill with fresh laws, making the years serving in the war fewer than formerly, granting liberty of appeal from the judges to the people, and joining to the senators who were judges at that time an equal number of citizens of the horseman's degree, endeavoring as much as in him lay the lesson lay to lessen the power of the Senate, rather from passion and partisanship than from any rational regard to equity and the public good, or equality for that matter. And people need to stop that. You stop that with their politics. Make it about principles, not some, well, it's this party or this person. Don't make it personal. If they've done something wrong, address that. But, if you don't like their personalities, like, sort of leave that stuff out. And when it came to the question whether these laws should be passed, and they perceived that the opposite party were strongest, the people as yet being not got together in a full body, and they began first of all to gain time by speeches in accusation of some of their fellow magistrates, and at length adjourned the assembly till the day following. Tiberius then went down into the marketplace amongst the people, and made his address to them humbly and with tears in his eyes, and told them he had just reason to suspect that his adversaries would attempt in the night time to break open his house and murder him. And this worked so strongly with the multitude that several of them pitched tents round about his house and kept guard all night for the security of his person. By break of day came one of the soothsayers, who prognosticate good or bad success by the pecking of fowls, and threw them something to eat. The soothsayers use the utmost endeavors to fright the fowls out of their coop, but none of them except one would venture out, which fluttered with his left wing and stretched out its leg and ran back into the coop without eating anything. This put Tiberius in mind of another ill omen which had formerly happened to him. He had a very costly headpiece which he made use of when he engaged in any battle, and into this piece of armor 2 serpents crawled, laid eggs, and brought forth young ones, the remembrance of which made Tiberius more concerned now than otherwise he would have been. Well, for a lot of people, that's like a good omen, right? But you know how omens work. It's whatever you're kind of, going to make of it, or make nothing of it. It's like, okay, well, it's just some natural occurrence, right? Because that's really what it is. But these things can remind you to, pray for things. Is that the right word for you? However, he went towards the capital as soon as he understood that the people were assembled there. But before he got out of the house, he stumbled upon the threshold with such violence that he broke the nail of his great toe, insomuch that blood gushed out of his shoe. He was not gone very far before he saw 2 ravens fighting on the top of a house which stood on his left hand as he passed along, and though he was surrounded with a number of people, a stone struck from its place by one of the ravens fell just at his foot. This even the boldest men about him felt as a check, but Blasius Acuma, who was present, told him that it would be a shame and an ignominious thing for Tiberius, who was the son of Gracchus, the grandson of Scipio Africanus, and the protector of the Roman people, to refuse, for fear of a silly bird to answer, when his countrymen called to him, and that his adversaries would represent it, not as a mere matter for the ridicule, but would declaim about it to the people as the mark of a tyrannical temper, which felt a pride in taking liberties with the people. At the same time, several messengers came also from his friends to desire his presence at the capital, saying that all things went there according to expectation, and indeed Tiberius's first entrance there was in every way successful. As soon as ever he appeared, the people welcomed him with loud acclamations, and as he went up to his place, they repeated their expressions of joy and gathered in a body around him, so that no one who was not well known to be his friend might approach. Mucius then began to put the business again to the vote, but nothing could be performed in the usual course and order, because of the disturbance caused by those who were on the outside of the crowd, where there was a struggle going on with those of the opposite party, who were pushing on and trying to force their way in and establish themselves among them. Whilst things were in this confusion, Flavius Flaccus, a senator standing in a place where he could be seen, but at such a distance from Tiberius that he could not make him hear, signified to him by motions of his hand that he wished to impart something of the consequence to him in private. Well, very often it's good not to just jump to making a public spectacle, right? Tiberius ordered the multitude to make way for him, by which means, though not without some difficulty, Flavius got to him and informed him that the rich men, in a sitting of the Senate, seeing they could not prevail upon the consul to espouse their quarrel, had come to a final determination amongst themselves that he should be assassinated, and to that purpose had a great number of their friends and servants ready armed to accomplish it. Tiberius no sooner communicated this confederacy to those about him, but they immediately tucked up their gowns, broke the halberds which the officers used to keep the crowd off into pieces, and distributed them among themselves, resolving to resist the attack with these. Those who stood at a distance wondered, and asked what was the occasion. Tiberius, knowing that they could not hear him at that distance, lifted his hand to his head, wishing to intimate the great danger which he apprehended himself to be in. His adversaries, taking notice of that action, ran off at once to the Senate house, and declared that Tiberius desired the people to bestow a crown upon him, as if this were the meaning of his touching his head. This news created general confusion in the senators, and Nasica at once called upon the consul to punish this tyrant and defend the government. The consul mildly replied that he would not be the first to do any violence, and as he would not suffer any freeman to be put to death before the sentence had lawfully passed upon him, so neither would he allow any measure to be carried into effect, if by persuasion or compulsion on the part of Tiberius the people had been induced to pass an unlawful vote. But, well, how would it be unlawful back then if they... Because wouldn't it be super easy to just, oh, everybody here, what's the actual vote? Of course, if somebody lied about, if most of the room raises their hands for something and somebody says, oh, see, people were against it by the majority. So, wait, what? But Nasica, rising from his seat, since the consul said he regards not the safety of the commonwealth, let every one who will defend the laws follow me. He then, casting the skirt of his gown over his head, hastened to the Capitol. Those who bore him company wrapped their gowns also about their arms, and forced their way after him. And as they were persons of the greatest authority in the city, the common people did not venture to obstruct their passing, but were rather so eager to clear the way for them, that they tumbled over one another in haste. The attendants they brought with them had furnished themselves with clubs and staves from their houses, and they themselves picked up the feet and other fragments of stools and chairs, which were broken by the hasty flight of the common people. Thus armed, they made towards Tiberius, knocking down those whom they found in front of him, and those were soon wholly dispersed, and many of them slain. Tiberius tried to save himself by flight. As he was running, he was stopped by one who caught hold of him by the gown, and he threw it off and fled in his undergarment only, and stumbling over those who before had been knocked down, as he was endeavoring to get up again, Publius Satirius, a tribune, Satirius. That's an interesting sounding name, right? One of his colleagues was observed to give him the first fatal stroke by hitting him upon the head with the foot of a stool. The second blow was claimed as though it had been a deed to be proud of by Lucius Rufus, and of the rest there fell above 300 killed by clubs and staves only, none by an iron weapon. This, we are told, the first sedition amongst the Romans since that abrogation of kingly government that ended in the effusion of blood. All former quarrels, which were neither small nor about trivial matters, were always amicably composed by mutual concessions on either side, the Senate yielding for fear of the Commons, and the Commons out of respect to the Senate. And it is probable indeed that Tiberius himself might then have been easily induced, by mere persuasion, to give way, and certainly, if attacked at all, must have yielded without any recourse to violence and bloodshed, as he had not, at that time, above 3,000 men to support him. But it is evident that this conspiracy was fomented against him. More out of the hatred and malice which the rich men had to his person than for the reasons which they commonly pretended against him, in testimony of which we may adduce the cruelty and unnatural insults which they used to his dead body, for they would not suffer his own brother, though he earnestly begged the favor to bury him in the night, but threw him, together with the other corpses, into the river. Neither did their animosity stop here, for they banished some of his friends without legal process, and slew as many of the others as they could lay their hands on, amongst whom Theophanes the orator was slain, and when Caius Vidius cruelly murdered by being shut up in a large tun with vipers and serpents. Valasius of Cumma, indeed, was carried before the consuls and examined touching what had happened, and freely confessed that he had done, without scruple, whatever Tiberius bade him. What, cried Nasica, then if Tiberius had bidden you burn the Capitol, would he have burnt it? The first answer was that Tiberius never would have ordered any such thing, which, January 6, 2021, watch the video, the contrary was ordered, right? But being pressed with the same question by several, he declared, if Tiberius had commanded it, it would have been right for me to do it, for he never would have commanded it if it had not been for the people's good. Blasius at this time was pardoned, and afterwards went away to Aristonicus in Asia. And when Aristonicus was overthrown and ruined, killed himself. Okay, I was wondering when we were going to have suicide in this chapter. It's like, why? It's better to do some good with what you have left, not, yeah. The Senate, to soothe the people after these transactions, did not oppose the division of the public lands, and permitted them to choose another commissioner in the room of Tiberius. So they elected Publius Crassus, who was Gracchus's near connection, as his daughter Licinius was married to Caius Gracchus, although Cornelius Nepos says that it was not Crassus's daughter whom Caius married, but Brutus's, who triumphed for his victories over the Lusitanians. But most writers state that, as we have done, the people, however, showed evident marks of their anger at Tiberius's death, and were clearly waiting only for the opportunity to be revenged, and Nasica was already threatened with an impeachment. The Senate, therefore, fearing lest the mischief should befall him, sent him ambassador into Asia, although there was no occasion for his going thither, for the people did not conceal their indignation even in the open streets, but railed at him as much as the media has stirred up something about one politician. You see people swearing at another politician in the street the past year and some. Whenever they met him abroad, calling him a murderer and a tyrant, one who had polluted the most holy and religious spot in Rome with the blood of a sacred and inviolable magistrate. And so Nasica left Italy, although he was bound, being the chief priest, to officiate in all principal sacrifices, thus wandering wretchedly and ignominiously from one place to another. He died in a short time after, not far from Pergamus. It is no wonder that the people had such an aversion to Nasica, when even Scipio Africanus, though so much and so deservedly beloved by the Romans, was in danger of quite losing the good opinion which the people had of him, only for repeating, when the news of Tiberius's death was first brought to Amantia, the verse out of Homer, "Even so perish all who do the same," and afterwards being asked by Caius Fulvius in the great assembly what he thought of Tiberius's death, he gave an answer of verse to Tiberius's public actions, upon which account the people thenceforth used to interrupt him when he spoke, which until that time they had never done, and he, on the other hand, was induced to speak ill of the people. But of this the particulars are given in the life of Scipio. Well, we see a problem here that we see elsewhere, is that justice is justice. The status and stuff and group of the person doesn't matter. It's and the place too. Yeah, sometimes there's rituals and stuff that are done in this place or the other place or whatever, right? But the thing about that is that some of the other ethics should be carried on all over the place, right?